Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the growing rift between Israeli Jews and United States Jews, Jews in America. Tension between Israeli and American Jewry is not new, yet the tension we are witnessing here and now has become fodder for discussion, debate, and even news coverage, and deservedly so. We, Jewry, are in the throes of one of the most significant and divisive set of differences in our history. Nothing this vast, no rift this wide between American and Israeli Jewry has existed since the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. And I fear, without drastic change on both sides, tensions will inevitably worsen. The tension is not one-sided. It is the end result of two sides changing. Changes that have taken place in Israel and in American Jewry. Changes in priorities, changes in status, changes in how one perceives the other and how they perceive themselves. There are macro changes and micro changes. Changes that affect the entire community and differences within each community that lead to one group being maybe louder, stronger, more articulate, and certainly more worthy of media attention. What makes this new reality even more significant, even more difficult to fathom, is that this time, past experiences and history cannot help us solve the problem. In May of 1977, Menachem Begin was elected to serve as Israeli Prime Minister. Many members of the Jewish community from the political left openly and vocally despised Begin, but they respected his position as the leader of the Jewish state, of the State of Israel. Yitzhak Shamir served as Israel's prime minister twice, once succeeding Begin, and once in a power share with Labor Shimon Peres. He too was thought of, that is, Shamir was thought of as a pariah for the political left. But during his tenure in office, Shamir received their respect, even if not their adoration, at least their respect. Respect for the position of Prime Minister of Israel. Ariel Sharon, who served as Israeli Prime Minister from 2001 to 2006, he was actually called the Butcher by some. He received this ignoble moniker because of his indirect role in the massacres that took place in the Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, Sabra and Shatila. But once in position, Sharon received again by mainstream Jewish leadership across the board in the United States, albeit not infrequent protests outside his meetings and public events, he received respect. That was then, this is now. And now there is a difference. Israel was once a sine qua non for American Jewry. It is no longer so. The expression sine qua non sounds like a word salad, like a garbled nonsense, when literally translated from the Latin, which means without which not. But what sine qua non really means is without something, something else is impossible. In other words, without Israel, Jewish life in America would be impossible. That was the status. Because Israel is absolutely essential, vital, and indispensable for American Jewish life. I am a product of that thought, more so of that belief. I thought that way when I was growing up, and I still think that way today. But today, I am a minority opinion in American Jewish life. Today, the idea that Israel is a sine qua non does not hold true for a large number of Jews, especially younger Jews in the United States. For many younger Jews, millennials, Gen Zs, Jews, Judaism is not all that important. And if Judaism isn't important, the Jewish state has no significance. Why would the Jewish state resonate if Jewishness is not important to them? Their criticism of Israel is not born out of love, not born out of a broader mindset of what is right and wrong, as it always was when people criticize Israel. These Jewish Americans have equal disdain for Trump supporters as they do for Israel. And the overlap between haters of Trump and haters of Israel is as real as it is frightening. The spotlight highlighting the differences between then and now is focused on issues surrounding the movement of Israeli judicial reform. This is one overarching issue that highlights a huge and growing rift between Jews in America and Israel. It falls along political lines almost exclusively. The more centrist and liberal the American Jewry is, the more aghast they are that the Israeli right wants to curb the independence of the Israeli judiciary. Certainly, there are still Jews in America for whom Israel is not just a priority, but the priority. They still exist. There are still American Jews for whom Israel is still a sine qua non. But this group is primarily older or Orthodox Jews. They are Jews who received Jewish day school education or yeshiva education, or spent time in Israel during summers or during their gap year. Birthright programs are helping to make a dent in the paradigm that I'm drawing here. But the other group spent a summer and a year, not just a wonderful 10 days. And that's a big difference. Trips to Israel in any form are truly effective tools to build a relationship between Israelis, and the group's participants. Israel, too, has been dramatically changed over the years. The left wing of the Israeli political spectrum has all but imploded. Political dialogue is now between the center and the right. The traditional left parties that built Israel, Mapai, and then the Labor Party, is limping along and barely breathing today. Over the past 10 years, the left has failed miserably in Israel in conveying any of their values to younger Israelis. Their failure has been catastrophic, and that failure has been magnified as Israel's center and right have provided significant arguments to attract younger generations of Israelis. Of course, but also in the United States. The future does not bode well, yet I have tremendous faith. I have faith that over time, and with dedication of Jews on both sides, this bridge will be ultimately built over the chasm that I've described. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from the Jerusalem Post. It was published on March 5th, 2023, and it's authored by Jordan Cope. Its title is Defining the Fight Against Anti-Semitism. Opinion, subtitle, Jewish communities that once thrived in Spain, Poland, Germany, and Iraq for centuries, if not millennia, were effectively extinguished overnight. Cope lays out a simple plan to fight anti-Semitism. Here is how he begins. America is often described as the greatest place to be Jewish in the diaspora. With the Jewish diaspora having now existed for over 2,500 years, this hefty claim not only bears significant weight, but also truth. Some have correctly described the Jewish chapter in America as a golden age. Indeed, America has been great to its Jewish community, affording ample opportunities and civil liberties. However, history has demonstrated that for Jews in the diaspora, the welcome wagon can be fleeting. Jewish communities that once thrived in Spain, Poland, Germany, and Iraq for centuries, if not millennia, were effectively extinguished overnight. Many now fear that history will eventually repeat itself in America, where anti-Semitism has been rising for the last few years. Jews comprise 2.4% of the United States population, but suffer roughly 60% of all religiously motivated hate crimes. Cope now offers a staggering set of examples of recent attacks against Jews in the United States in order to prove his point. He continues, last month, 2 Jews were shot as they left synagogues in Los Angeles. A man reportedly fired blanks in the Jewish Community Center in San Francisco. And neo-Nazis announced a nationwide day of hate, harassing Jews beforehand and calling them the N-word, asking if they should be put in an oven and telling them to return to Israel. Hostile flyers filled with the age-old tropes are being distributed in cities across the country, and we are seeing anti-Semitism reported by students at the universities and high schools. Now Cope brings us a surprising example of those fighting this hatred. He brings the example from Arkansas. He writes, despite such surging anti-Semitism, there's room for optimism. As I learned when I testified before Arkansas's House and Senate committees, a growing movement of states are willing to fight anti-Semitism and alter the trajectory of Jewish history in the diaspora. Other states must follow Arkansas's example and codify the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA. It's a working definition of anti-Semitism codify it into law to ensure that government bodies can better identify and punish acts of unlawful anti-Semitism and educate staff to follow suit. Cope now explains that those who reject the IHRA definition reject it because they fear it infringes on free speech. He argues that they are wrong, and I believe that they are wrong also. This is his argument. The IHRA opponents also seek to delegitimize the IHRA legislation by misrepresenting the definition's founder opposes its use in policy. In reality, a score of individuals participated in the drafting process, and as noted by 3 of them, virtually all of them, the definition's drafters, except one, supported the IHRA's use by those who would put it to use. Such people include those in government and those responsible for identifying and responding to anti-Semitic hate, crimes, and other anti-Semitic events. After all, it's called a working definition for a reason. As anti-Semitism festers worldwide, Americans have a unique opportunity to lead in the fight against anti-Semitism by codifying a definition that can be used to help government officials fight it. Americans ought to support their state legislatures in their unprecedented efforts to combat anti-Semitism in a manner consistent with the concerns of the Jewish community and ensure that America and its golden age continue to remain the best place for the safety of Jewish life in the diaspora. This is an excellent piece. Thank you, Jordan Cope. It's important to utilize local state legislatures in order to achieve this end. There's no doubt about it. Next up is a column from the Allgemeiner. It was published on March 2nd, 2023, and it was the day Elan Ganalis, an American Jew, was murdered driving to a childhood friend's wedding in Israel. It was the day after 2 Israeli brothers, Hallel and Yaniv, were murdered while driving their car. It's authored by a character named the Elder of Zion, an obvious pseudonym, and it's entitled 75 Years Ago, Huge Terror Attack in Jerusalem Kills 50. This is a very powerful column. The column is accompanied actually by 2 original news clippings of the terror attack from 75 years ago. This is how the column begins. Today's news has uncomfortable echoes in the events of 75 years ago. On February 22nd, 1948, 3 trucks filled with explosives were exploded by Arabs in British Army uniforms on Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem. More than 50 people were killed, including several children. The Army of the Holy War, led by Abd al-Qadir al-Husseini, took responsibility for the attack. Several days later, al-Husseini was a relative of the Nazi-allied Mufti of Jerusalem. His group was essentially the Hamas of its day. 2 British Army deserters also participated in the attack. It is very obvious to the author and to anyone who knows the history of this period that the Mufti was involved in planning the attacks. This is how we know, and the author describes it this way. While the Mufti of Jerusalem denied any responsibility, his Arab Higher Committee distanced itself from it, saying the attack was a depravity unit from the Arab spirit. Those British soldiers said that they had been promised a huge reward from the Mufti for their part of the plot. The story is that when they went to claim that reward, the Mufti laughed at them. As with recent murderous terror attacks, Jewish leaders called for restraint, but sadly, many did not listen. The Irgun and Lehi groups, blaming the attack on the British, attacked and killed a number of British soldiers in revenge, while Arab snipers killed several Jews. The author concludes, explaining that the reason the terror attack was successful was because the British were not responsible and did not actually inform and tell the Jews that their trucks had been stolen. The real difference between then and now, of course, is that now the Jews can defend themselves. Then the British were still responsible for security, and they did not hold on to their end of the bargain. Even though they knew that their own vehicles had been stolen days before the attack, they didn't inform the Jewish guards in Jerusalem, who let the bomb-laden British trucks into the heart of the city, assuming they were safe. One heroic guard challenged the British soldiers at the time and was immediately murdered by them. As we try to break the cycle of the past, it is equally important to remember the history. Wow, very, very powerful. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 7 cartoons, memes, and headlines today. The first is a set of headlines about Kanye West and Adidas, the sneaker and sportswear company. To jog your memory, Adidas Sportswear dropped Kanye after a slew of terrible actions and statements he made about Jews. These 2 headlines underscore how Adidas is now in a pickle. This one is from the Washington Post. It reads, Adidas has $500 million worth of Kanye West sneakers and no good options. The next headline provides Adidas leadership's thoughts and a possible solution to the problem of $500 million worth of sneakers. The company cannot be connected to such a character as Kanye West and cannot sell a product even at a loss. So the headline reads, Adidas considers burning $500 million of tainted Yeezy products. Kanye West sneaker line, Adidas roughly 300 to 500 million of Yeezy's product it can't sell. This is quite a lot of waste, and Adidas has to swallow it. The next headline is about stealing catalytic converters. I brought this to your attention about a year ago when I showed you a car with a handwritten sign in the window explaining to potential thieves that their catalytic converter had already been stolen. This vandalism has since plagued America, and the headline reads here, Man in California fatally run over by SUV he was trying to steal catalytic converter from, authorities say. Next up is a cartoon about the origins of COVID. A woman says to a man while walking, I always figured COVID originated in the Wuhan lab, but when the FBI said it did, I have to wonder. That's very funny. You never know. Everything that's turned on its head now. These next 2 cartoons are about book censorship, on the right and on the left. The situation has risen to crazy levels, and my Picante piece is going to deal with that also. In this cartoon, the book burning conservative says to the liberal, how dare you censor a book before I get the chance to burn it? Next is a cartoon entitled, Books I Don't Agree With. It offers a new and literal definition of bookworms. Caterpillars are chomping away at the books from both sides, the right and the left. Bans on the right and woke on the left. Changes are in, no question about it. This last cartoon is about AI, artificial intelligence, taking over. Cartoonist is pointing out how AI is taking over journalism. The title is, Will AI Replace Journalists? A newspaper editor sitting at his desk. The computer asks the editor, what can I do for you? He answers, okay boy, go to Curson and send me a 10-page live report. That certainly strikes a nerve. A lot of things are changing because of AI. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. El Al's, Israel's flag airliner, was having trouble manning a flight to take the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and his wife Sarah to Italy for a meeting. And so the office of the Prime Minister reported that they were opening a tender to locate a pilot able to fly the 777 plane. Since the government began its push to legislate judicial overhaul, a move that has enraged many of the Israeli public, El Al pilots and cabin crew have been avoiding flights with the first couple of Israel. In an official statement, El Al explained, or perhaps explained away, the difficulties, saying that it was the result of limited number of pilots attached to the 777 fleets. The Netanyahus were traveling to Italy to meet with Italian far-right Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. In the end, El Al did find a crew. Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen and United Arab Emirates Ambassador to Israel, Mohammed Mahmoud Al-Kajjar, signed a customs valuation agreement. The agreement will put into effect the free trade agreement they already signed in May of 2022. This agreement is expected to lower or remove customs on 96% of the products imported and exported between the countries. According to the Foreign Minister Cohen, quote, the agreement will strengthen Israel's economy, unquote. Israel has criticized Brazil for their decision granting birth to 2 Iranian warships. Brazil came to their decision despite pressure from the United States not to grant birth to the warships, to the Iranian warships. Israel also urged Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's government to send the ships away. They're docked in Rio de Janeiro. Reuters has reported that back in January, Brazil declined to admit the Iranian ships as a gesture from Lula to Washington as he flew to D.C. to meet with President Joe Biden. Things have changed. The United States imposed new sanctions on Iranian and Iranian-linked shipping and petrochemical companies, including 2 shipping firms based in China. These sanctions can be viewed on the U.S. Treasury Department's website. According to the website, the sanctions also targeted 20 shipping vessels linked to firms in China, Vietnam, and the United Arab Emirates. Hungary is set to move its Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. The move, which will take place next month, is an act of support by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to his counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu. This dramatic move will make Hungary the first member state of the European Union to open an embassy in Jerusalem, which Israel claims, of course, as its capital, but which is not recognized by most countries because they question Jerusalem's status under international law. Israel hosted top U.S. military officer, Army General Mark Milley. Milley came to Israel for a series of discussions, including the need for cooperation on denying Iran nuclear weaponry. Milley's trip was unannounced. America's top military officer arrived in Israel ahead of a trip to Israel by U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin coming up soon. Austin's trip also includes neighboring countries, Egypt, Jordan, both U.S. allied Arab states that have influence on the Israeli-Palestinian affairs. But according to sources, the real purpose behind Milley's trip was to convey U.S. insistence that Israel not act unilaterally against Iran. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency has indicated that talks were ongoing with Iran on 2 sets of important matters, including the science sector, and there was, quote, great expectations, unquote, about the process. Rafael Grossi began a series of meetings in Tehran by saying that diplomats said that they were pushing Iran to cooperate with the IAEA investigation into uranium traces found at undeclared sites that had been enriched close to nuclear weapons grade. In Tehran, Grossi spoke to reporters and told them, quote, globally speaking, there are 2 sets of matters that are important. Clearly, there is a great expectation about our joint work in order to move forward in the issues that Iran and the agency are working on to clarify and to bring credible assurances about the nuclear program in Iran, unquote. We are being told that Iran responded very positively to the meetings and have given sweeping assurances to the UN nuclear watchdog that it will finally assist a long-stalled investigation into uranium particles found at undeclared sites and even reinstall removed monitoring equipment. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and Iran issued a joint statement just 2 days before a quarterly meeting of the agency's 35-nation Board of Governors. A man in New York City was sentenced to 18 months in prison after pleading guilty to a federal hate crime conspiracy charge for a series of anti-Semitic assaults he perpetrated in New York City. Sada Massoud, 29, of Staten Island, was arrested in June after authorities said that in April he punched and dragged a counter-protester who was draped in an Israeli flag at a pro-Palestinian demonstration. Prosecutors said that Massoud also admitted to attacking another person wearing a Star of David necklace in May of 2021, and another man wearing a yarmulke, a kippah, a Jewish skullcap, a month later. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that the Jews are called the people of the book? Today, we looked at 2 cartoons about books, and it really pains me to observe disrespect for books and for ideas, even ideas I disagree with, by the way. The expression probably emerged first in Islam. People of the book in Islam referred to other monotheists, non-Muslims, who were living in their midst. In this case, Jews were the predominant group living in the Muslim world, the Arab world at the time. The term ultimately became a synonym for Jews. In Arabic, the term al-Khatib here means, means here people, not nation of people, just people, a group of people. In Hebrew, the term a-sefer, in this case, does not mean just people, it means nation of the book. The best equivalent in Arabic would be ummah. As opposed to its original intended meaning as a pejorative term, in the modern era, Jews have taken the moniker people of the book and turned it into a very positive expression. The book, of course, means the Bible. While answering a question about who is a Jew, the late great Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz once said, "This is a Jew, one who kisses a book when he puts it down after reading it." That's profound. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.